Hi, and welcome to this week's From the Vault episode from the Magdalen House podcast. We are a 501c3 nonprofit organization based in Dallas, Texas, and known affectionately by many as Maggies. Every first and third Wednesday, we share an episode from one of our 3 podcast series. In our From the Vault episodes, we share past podcast releases from our 3 different podcast series: Recover Ed, Recovered, Interviews with Alcoholics, and Hope for the Family. Our podcasts aim to connect, inspire, and educate alcoholics, loved ones, and the community to the Magdalen House and the services we offer. We are so glad you're here. Thanks for listening.
Hello, everyone. So grateful to be here with you all this morning. This is Interview with a Recovered Drunk. And so I think we have some newbies on, so I'm just going to give a little background about what this is. This started when COVID first happened and when quarantine first happened as just another way, or as a way, to keep the Next Step participants engaged and connected. Little did we know that this was going to be the new normal, and this was going to grow into what it is today. And so I'm just super, super grateful each week that we get to do one of these. I think it's such an amazing way to connect because they are conversations, and so even though this is being recorded, this is ultimately for the participants, for you all first. I'm really excited about our guest today. It is Tina, who I'm sure most of you on this call, if not all of you, know. I feel like I've gotten to know Tina through Next Step, which is really, really cool. I say this a lot, that I feel like I get to know women through the women they sponsor. And something that I just love so much about Tina is like her passion for helping alcoholic women, and then also that it's so genuine. You can really tell that it's because she cares. And I also know that she will tell the truth. And so that's another thing that I love about Tina, and that I've gotten to know about her through the women she sponsors. And so anyways, I'm so grateful to have you here with us. Thank you so much. I've been wanting to have you on, and now it's here. So if you could just start by giving a little bit of background information about what led you getting sober, and just to qualify yourself for the women, and then we'll go from there.
Thank you, Stephanie. My name is Tina, and I'm a very grateful recovered alcoholic. My day of grace is January 5th, 2013, and that is a miracle. I'm honored to be on the call this morning. Thank you for having me. It's hard to believe that I'm actually qualified to do this, because sometimes it doesn't feel real. I really do feel like sometimes I just want to pinch myself, because there was a time when, and it doesn't seem like it was that long ago, where things were really hopeless, So here's a little bit about me. I don't have a memory without alcohol. I grew up in an alcoholic home, and so by the time I was 10, I knew, genuinely knew, as a little girl, that my dark days were over. That my parents had finally decided to split up, and I'm the baby. I have 2 older brothers, and that weekend that my dad moved out, my brothers threw a party. And that was my first drink. And I can't say that I had some sort of miraculous experience with it the first time, because I got really sick because I was only 9. But I just didn't know any other way to live life. I mean, it was just what everybody did. And so I remember watching my brothers, and life was not working out for them. But, they still drank. And I'll never forget the moment that I sat on my bedroom floor in middle school, and I just said, God, I'm going to be so different than the rest of my family. I am going to do this. I'm going to have a good life. And I would journal and talk about all my dreams, how I wanted to be a mom, and how I wanted to have a good family, and how I would never do those things that had happened to me and to my brothers. and to my mom. And so that was a minute. I'll never forget that moment. It was like, Tina pulled herself up by her bootstraps, and I was all my self-will. I got a lot of self-will. And that's where it starts to like take over my life. And I went on to be the first person in my family to graduate from college. I always carried around the weight of my brothers, so that my dad would have one child to be proud of. And so everything I did was always by accomplishment, and I was able to achieve a lot. But drinking is a big, big, big part of my story. I drank in middle school. I drank when I went to college. The wheels totally came off. I can't even believe I got a degree, you guys. I remember the week before grades were due, I suddenly was standing in the middle of campus, and I started to truly panic. And I ran to the admin building and to check my grades and make sure I was actually going to graduate, because my grades, I never went to class. So yeah, I made it through college. But that's really when you come to find out. They say in the book, it says that alcohol is just a symptom, right? It's not really my problem. I didn't have a roadmap for what I was doing, and so I got home from college and started to look for a job, and got my own place, and it wasn't long before this job that I had, they said, there's this really nice boy, and he's doesn't have anybody to date. And I was like, I'll put my sign me up. I want to date him. And so next thing you know, I lassoed up a nice boy, and we had a really good time for many, many years, drinking, and we went on to have 2 kids. But here's the thing, drinking was always a part of my story, and it was all fine. Everything was not bad. Like it was, I can look back now and see that drinking was a problem. I drank different than everybody else, but it wasn't really until I had my first child that I could tell a difference, because I had stopped drinking, did the prenatal vitamins, did all the perfect stuff. But as soon as Ryan was born, something was different. And I said, if we're gonna have another one, let's do it quickly, because that was always kind of the plan, to have 2 kids close together, because I wanted them to have each other, based on the way I grew up and based on my goals, right? I'm living life by Tina's goals. And so we had another one quickly, and it was after that I was gone. From 32 to 40, that was it. I was unable to, and at the time I thought that I was unable to control my drinking, but now this is where I started to stutter, because it's so hard to explain, right? Like I thought that I was making these choices. I thought that because parenting was hard, and that was really the one thing that really drove me to drinking more, was this idea of parenting, because I felt so insecure. I felt so unqualified. And it wasn't that, right? It was that allergy starting to kick off, and I didn't know. And so here I am, and I'm literally like the woman who just like every year just starts, walking a little lower and a little lower. And my consequences are starting to pile up, and I'm drinking all the time. I'm keeping bottles at friends' houses. I'm keeping booze in the car. I'm driving all the time with my signature was like the red Solo cup in the console. But yet I saw a lot of my family members drinking, and so I couldn't quite understand why it was different for me. And I kept thinking was, man, they're stronger than I thought they were. If they were able to pull this off, because I was just started to, drink earlier in the day, and it became a cycle of me drinking 24/7. And it means like waking up in the middle of the night, needing to reach over to grab a bottle, to get rid of the shakes, the pain, getting the kids to school, and then being back off to the races. And it just became my normal. And here's the thing about that, and this is what drives my passion, right? Is I was able to accomplish so much before alcohol started taking me down, and all that will I had, it wasn't working, and I was dying, literally dying. And I had no idea where to go. I had no idea what to do. I had no idea what was wrong with me. And everybody around me, I'm living out, in Frisco, Texas, and I'm around all these families and everyone just is so normal. And I just was in the middle of all by myself. And so God started to, I always say God hit me beside the head with a frying pan, because I probably had a lot more signs before I started to listen. But luckily I had gone, at this point, I'm getting divorced because I needed to leave the home so I could go drink. I knew the kids would be safe. I had gotten into a new relationship with Lori, and we were having relationship problems, and that's not a big surprise, right? And so she said, gosh, things are kind of rocky. We need to go to counseling. And will never be able to repay the woman that said, come to counseling by yourself. Tina, you need to, let's just talk to you. And I kept thinking, oh, great, because I could, everything's her problem. I would love to tell you all about her, all about her issues. But the reality is that she wanted to talk to me about AA. And so she did. She spent a couple weeks breaking down my bias and why I wasn't even willing. And I'm the girl that was never going to stop drinking. And that's what I told everybody. I will never stop drinking. And here's the truth of it, right? I can say this now. I couldn't say it back then. I said it because I have a lot of pride and ego, and I'm really, really, really hard-headed and stubborn. But the reality of it was I didn't want to live without booze, and I didn't know how to live without it, and I knew how bad it was. No one else could understand what I was going through. And so the idea of living without it wasn't even a possibility. So I just was like, I'm never going to give up. I'm never going to stop drinking. But I was really scared. So she convinced me to check out an AA meeting. I went to dinner that night, and I told Lori I had some homework, and I said, I've got to, find an AA meeting. And she, within seconds, had her phone up, and she was like, here are, 4 options. And the top option was a place called the Magdalen House. And we had no idea what we were getting into. We walked in and went to a couple meetings. But the one time that I went to a meeting by myself, this lady walks in, and she looks kind of familiar, and she introduces herself, and I'm like, wow, I know this lady. What is she doing here? It's so wild that she would be here. And we had worked together 10 years prior. And so I listened to her story, and I sat in that meeting room and cried like a baby, because no one had ever talked about the things she was talking about. No one had ever said out loud what I was going through. And so I went up to her and I said, do you remember me? We used to work together. And she looked at me. She did not remember me, because I didn't look anything like I do now or back when she worked with me. I was a mess. And that's why, we can't judge each other by what we look like when we get here, because we're not ourselves. And she agreed to meet with me, and we sat out on the front porch of Maggie's, and she started to qualify me, what I now know is qualifying, which is, how much is enough, and have you ever tried to stop, and then she told me about herself, and I just cried again like a baby. And I just said, I can't wait to work the steps. When I get sober and when I get, recovered, I am going to tell every woman I possibly can about this, because I've been in advertising and marketing my whole career, and we sell so many things on billboards that people don't need to know about. Why are we not telling women about the solution? Why are we not telling people about, that there's hope? And this is why I always say that my favorite chapter in the whole book is called More About Alcoholism, because I got up from meeting with her, on fire, ready to do this, walked back to my car across the street, opened up the door, and there was that red Solo cup. And I looked at it and I said, that woman does not know who she's dealing with. I have overcome so much in my life. Now that I know what's wrong with me, I got this, right? I'm going to prove her wrong. And so I met with her September. I came into Maggie's in January. So I'm so lucky that it didn't take me that many months to test drive this. But I'll tell you, the night before I came in, I did try to take my life, and because I just couldn't imagine life without booze. And I promised God, I said, if I wake up in the morning and I'm still alive, then I'll know what you want me to do. And I woke up, and the minute that I crossed the threshold of Maggie's, I always say it's like jumping off a cliff, and I've never looked back. I work this program like my hair's on fire, because I know in my heart that if I drink again, I'm going to die. And the step one experience that we all need is hard and it's painful. And that woman on that front porch that day promised me that my experience would help somebody. At that moment, I didn't understand that, nor did I really think about it. All I knew is I was dying. It worked for her, and she told me that it would work for me. And I walked to the doors of Maggie's, and there was a woman standing there. She had been in there in September, when I was first coming to those meetings, and she had relapsed. And so she was standing at the door, and she was like, Tina. And so it was another sign. It was just like, oh, this is it. This is where I'm supposed to be. And that's just been, and here I am, 7 years later. You know, I listened to Ainsley's podcast last night, and I completely relate to her when she says that Maggie's is my home. That Maggie's is where my heart is. And I'm just grateful that I get to be alive and make use of my experience. So
Thank you so much. So good stuff. I have a plethora of questions. I just don't know which one to start with first. I'm going to ask this one because I feel like it's just one that is asked so much, and we just can't hear enough solution on this topic for the mothers who get here. And how was it repairing the relationships with your children? Were they affected by your alcoholism, and how did God restore those relationships? Because I know that you have a solid relationship with your children today.
That's a beautiful question. Thank you for asking me that. Today I do have a good relationship with my kids, and that was one of the things when I sat on that living room floor in my bedroom floor when I was a kid, and I said, I'm not going to do these things to my children. And if I were to tell my story in a long extended version of it, you would go on to hear that I did all those things. And so I knew how they felt. And it was through sponsorship. I have a sponsor who has kids, and I quickly realized when I sobered up, started working the steps, started trying to live life, that I didn't have a drinking problem, I had a life problem. And I still had all those same insecurities I had as a new mom. It was like life had gone on hold almost, because I picked right back up in life, and those insecurities that I had when I tried to drink those away. And so through me working this program and constant thought of others and giving them the space, walking the walk, believing the book when it says that there's a long road of reconstruction and we have to take the lead. A lot of prayers with God. And because you can't just put a big blanket of solution over anything, right? It's always in the details and the situations that you come across with kids, because they've got their own story and this is their life too, and I can't erase that. The goal is always, right, is for us as recovered alcoholics to use our stories for good. And there's no different than for my children. And so I have seen and witnessed both of my kids being able to help people or have compassion for people that have gone through the same thing that they have gone through. I walked in on my daughter one night. She was on the phone and it was late, and I walked in and I said, Megan, it's too late. You need to hang up the phone. And she said, well, it's my friend, and she's in her closet crying because her mom's drinking and she's really scared. And I said, there's nobody more qualified to help her than you. So you just stay on the phone as long as you need to. So it's appreciating and acknowledging their journey and respecting that this is a part of their story and not needing to erase it, but also to support them in their recovery, support them in knowing that I love them. When I was drinking, I was a very ugly drunk. I was mean, and I had sharp tongue. I had harsh words. And so even today, I find myself, and someone had mentioned to me recently about how calm I am. And a part of that is because I have worked to be a rock and not be so volatile, because I always was. And so I want my kids to know that when they walk into a room, I'm not going to lunge at them anymore. And that has taken a lot of just patience on my part, and knowing that they're people. They are real people, and they're going to grow up to be, I want them to know what my dream was, which was, if this becomes your problem, when you get to be an adult, there's a solution, and I'm walking the walk for them. It's just as much as I'm walking it for the women that I love so much. So I hope that answers your question. They both do go to counseling at least once a month. And I believe that just honoring their journey for them and respecting them for what they've been through, and giving them the space and the room to be there.
Yes, that was an awesome answer. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to piggyback off of the relationship with your children. I want to talk about the relationship with your ex-husband, if that's okay, because I know I heard in a happy hour you mentioned that he wanted to buy a brick, and I thought that was so cool, because he probably saw a lot of your alcoholism, but obviously God has done something in that relationship to restore it, right? And so do you have anything that you want to share about that, or an amends, or anything that you want to speak on that topic?
I would love to. It's one of the blessings in my life. When he met me, I was a different person. I was more like I am now, and but actually not quite, right? Because being recovered, it really is a magical place to be. Yeah, he is the one that bore most of the brunt of my drinking. We were married for 9 years, and I was never going to get married. From my experience, I just said, if I ever get married, I'm never going to get divorced, because I've been through that before. And there came a point, like I mentioned before, that I knew I needed to leave the home, because I had to go do what I needed to do, and I didn't want to hurt anybody else. And I really do believe that God is in so many details, and he's in my ex-husband's heart. He really is. We've always had a good relationship. There are times, of course, that he doesn't like me, and I'm sure that's more often than not, but he's a good dad, and he's always been able to put the kids' interests above ours. And today, I consider him to still be my family. We were, as Stephanie mentioned about the brick, we took a family vacation this summer. Lori had a trip that she needed to use, and so we had other plans, but because of COVID, we decided to stay in the States and take a family trip. And so we jokingly said, why don't you, we invited him to come with us, and because when the kids fight, at least they won't have to call you. You'll already be there. And so we were on the beach one morning, and an email had come through about the brick campaign, and Lori was asking me about it, and I was we were just having a conversation about it. And he said, what's this brick? What are y'all talking about? And we explained it to him, and he said, yeah, I'm definitely going to buy a brick. And we kind of looked at him, and he goes, what? All the hell you put me through? I'm buying a brick. And he said, and I'm even going to put that on there. So he did it at buying a brick. He did not put that on there, but I tell you, when you get to Maggie's and you start studying the steps and you start to look at like all the things you got to do, right? You think it's gonna be so overwhelming. Like, how can I carry the message and fit this into my life? I mean, I live in Collin County, and so I'm not very close to Maggie's. I'm an hour away, much less any place to carry the message, and I just didn't know how it was going to work. And there's never been a time when him or Lori or the kids have ever given me a hard time. And so I always say that God arranged my life so I could do this, right? I could do this and show up 100%, because we all the fighting is put aside, because when someone's dying, those things don't matter anymore, right? When you just want someone to live because they're the mother of your children, tell me that's not God, right?
Thank you. You had mentioned earlier that you have a lot of self-will, and a common theme that has been occurring in our accountability group is, how do I know my will versus God's will? We've talked about that in accountability or in daily check-ins. I don't remember which one, but it seems to be a reoccurring theme, to the point where I'm trying to figure out an assignment that we can do around that topic. But so I would just love it if you could speak on the topic of, and answer the question for the ladies, is like, how do you know whenever it's God's will versus Tina's will?
That is an amazing question, because here's the cool part about this program is you don't have to get it right 100%. It's about learning and growing and making mistakes. But if you are talking to God and you're talking to your sponsor, then my sponsor always guides me back to God, 100% God. And if I don't know if it's my will or God's will, I'll pray about it. If I do something on Tina's will, I always know. Now I know. I will tell you, give you a little caveat. I didn't always know that it wasn't that it was my will, but now I know when it's my will, because it just doesn't sit right with me, right? I know that in my heart of hearts, when I'm being honest, that I'm pushing my own agenda, that my motives are not right, that I'm trying to get what I want because I want it. And that's where that rigorous honesty in this program comes in play. And it's not necessarily honest with anybody outside of me, because for a long time, I was not honest. This disease drives us to be people that we're not. I had to be dishonest to get what I needed. I needed the drink. And I would say and do whatever it took to get the drink. And so to think about it in that terms, to go from not being able to be honest to being honest, the tools I use: pausing a lot. Even in today's, and I find, like, it's so crazy when you do your inventory and you give over your character defects in 6 and 7, and they say you don't know what to give. You just give it all because you don't know what God's going to use in you. And one of the things that He's always kept here with me is this sense of like just really sit on things. And so I pause a lot. And if I'm not sure, I call my sponsor. And then if I'm still not sure, I get on my knees and I pray about it. Because I had a solid step 1 experience that shows me that Tina living her life on her terms never ends up well. And if I start getting twisted and having, and I know what that feels like. I did it enough, 8 years of hard, heavy drinking times 300, 365 times 8. That's a lot of days of Tina's will. And so I know what it feels like, and I'm honest about it. But yeah, pausing, talking to God, and making a lot of mistakes. I really have made just so many mistakes, but being willing to get honest with my sponsor and tell her about those things. And she tells me the hard things, that you were running on self-will. You're being inconsiderate. My forked tongue did not turn round overnight. I mean, I really was a sharp person. I grew up that way. I grew up in an alcoholic home. And so, even after things got better at home, I grew up in a home where words were not nice. And so it's taken me a long time to get where I am, I tell you, but but just have a lot of grace for yourself too. But be willing, right? Willing is like the major word in this. There's so many major words in this program, but willingness comes from your experience. But be willing to listen to your sponsor and be willing to call and get honest, because otherwise, why would you do this? I can lie. I'm good at it, right? But that's not where the magic is. And once you get a little touch of that magic and you taste it and you know what that life looks like, I just want to run towards it. And I also have a sponsor who admits her mistakes. She admits her faults. She has a sponsor. She is sponsored. She thrives on growing. She thrives on so she's my mentor, right? She shows me that no matter what year I'm at, no matter what stage I'm at, that there's always room for improvement. And then I'm always, if I make a mistake, it just great. You made a mistake? Awesome. Because that's where the growth is, and it's okay. Before, right, we make mistakes, we either go drink or we just want to just put ourselves in the ground, or because I'm an extremist, right? I'm an alcoholic, so I don't do anything in moderation. But yeah, I mean, there's lots of room for growth, lots of grace, lots of pausing, lots of like listening. And I'll tell you, when you pause and you ask God to guide you, He will. And it's not always on my terms. And I'll tell you, God also puts me in a lot of uncomfortable positions. And I will say, God, this is not a comfortable spot for me to be in, but this is where I'm at, and I know you have a plan. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. What I do know about you is you have a very full life. That's one of the benefits of this program is we get affairs, right? We get to participate in life. And then I also know that you sponsor a lot of women. And just from what I know from on the other end, because I get to see things on the back end, it's kind of cool, is that you are available for these women. And so like you're a sponsor who like is actively sponsoring. And so I kind of want to know, one, I feel like, how do you do it all? But two, like what drives you to have that same passion and everything today for recovery has it been that way since day one, or has this been like a growing process? I feel like that's a lot of questions in one question. So go.
Well, this is one of the reasons I'm such a big fan of Next Step, is because it helps you learn how to weave the program into your life. And I have to say that it took me a long time because of the years I drank and because of my life, insecurities. I was quiet for a long, long time. And then when I got sober, I was even more quiet. And so I haven't always had the opportunity to sponsor. God did not put that in my life. And I really do believe that whatever He sends my way is what His plan is. And so this is what happens when you pray for your will and God shows you what His will is. And I didn't really realize that was happening to me until I was talking to a really good friend of mine in recovery, and she pointed it out to me. She said, well, you're praying for this, but He's sending you this. So clearly He's given you your answer. And so, but I know that my recovery comes first above everything else. It's above my kids. And if you haven't seen my kids, they're beautiful human beings. And they're now 17 and 18. They're above. My program is above everything, because if I put that first, if I put God first, God's will for my life, right, ahead of everything else, then I can do anything else I want. And I'm not doing it because I want to do anything else I want. I'm doing it because that's just how it works. And it's a beautiful life. And I've always been passionate, and it has been a gradual process of me coming alive, and it hasn't always been this way. I mean, first 2 years when I started to speak up, they were like, who's that girl? Because I just was a slow person to come out of my shell. And that's why when I see women that are quiet or don't feel like they fit in or are riddled with insecurity or think this isn't going to work for them, I'm like, you come right over here because I know exactly how you feel. And even if I don't sponsor them, it's I am excited to show women that when you live on God's plan and you're walking that walk with Him, I don't know what God's got planned for me in the next 6 months, but whatever it is, I know it's going to be better than drinking. I know it's going to be better than my will. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but I am, I show up and God shows me where to go.
Anybody? Okay. So given your experience with coming out of your shell and being insecure and all of those things, what advice would you, or what would you say to the women who are terrified to carry the message, or to chair a meeting, or to tell their story, or to sponsor because of those insecurities? Like, what would you say to them?
I would say that because this program requires you to, the book says we were reborn. And so I always talk about it in terms of like a new toolbox. I had an old toolbox, and when I walked through the doors of Maggie's, when I jumped off that cliff, I left that toolbox way up there. Like I left it behind me. And so now I have a new toolbox. And these tools, I don't know how to use them, but I'm surrounded by women that do, including my sponsor. And so it's like riding a bike. We don't all just get on a bike and just take off down the road. We don't know how to get on the bike. We don't know how the pedals work. How do the handles work with the pedals? Then you get on it and you fall down and you get hurt. And then you got to get on the road and you're all wobbly, and car drives by and you think you're going to fall down because it's too much, right? It's so overwhelming. But and here's the thing, like life run on Tina's will, yeah, you guys might as well get out of the way. But life run on God's will, it's beautiful. But it takes a few times getting on that bike, right? And that's metaphorically, but like trying it out, and then your faith starts to grow when you see He shows up, when you see that you don't remember what you even talked about, when you see that there's this transformation during that process of doing whatever it is. And then the coolest part for me in the beginning, going to carry the message, I was surrounded by women who were completely supportive, always supportive. They always, just in the nicest, lovingly way possible, would say, "You're going to do step 2 today, and this is what you're going to say." And I had been, studying and been trained to do how to do it, and watched them for a while, learned how to do it. And when that moment came and I couldn't open my mouth and only get a couple words out, okay, all right. And they just pick up and they just keep going. And every week I'd get a little better. Every week I'd get a little better. It's just like riding a bike, right? I've got a new set of tools, and I've got to start learning how to use them. And if I don't know which one to pick up, I call my sponsor and she'll say, "You got to use this one, or you got to use that one." Just because it's new and it puts you in that uncomfortable position doesn't mean you can't do it. It just means you got to practice. It's like everything else, right? Because I'm an extremist. I think I got to wake up one day and be perfect at everything. And that's simply not true. And so I think it's a beautiful part of the process. I will never forget the women. Just like, when you did your intake at Maggie's, or that first person you talked to that you said, "I'm ready for help." We never forget the women that have been in our journeys, that have been in those parts where we've been vulnerable, And this gets you really vulnerable. And I'll never forget the women that were so nice to me and so helpful and so kind. It's um, the book talks about, we walk shoulder to shoulder, and there's nothing that will give you a sisterhood quite like carrying the message, because you've been in the trenches with these women and you've shared your experience, you've shared the solution. And that's our obligation, because if that woman hadn't shown up on that day that my heart was open and willing for that small of a window of time, I don't know where I would be. What if she hadn't shown up? What if God hadn't sent her? Like she decided that day she had something better to do. And so you're out planting the seed, and it's not like you don't know this topic. This topic is the one thing I know the most. Like of all the things in life, I can talk about booze and alcohol and drinking and alcoholism and the book and all those things all day long, because it's the one thing I know the most. And so, yeah.
Thank you. What is your favorite page or favorite part in the book, if you had to pick one, and why? Everybody write it down, because we're going to read it after this.
Well, I've got a couple things to say on this, because I think it is so critical for women in the beginning to not feel like they have some sort of standard to live up to. I'm not a book whiz. I don't pretend to know everything in the book, and I don't pretend to know all the pages, because quite frankly, I don't. And so I remember watching women in the beginning that did know by page number and where this was, and they could quote everything, and I was so intimidated. And so now I'm very transparent about when I chair a meeting, I say, just so you know, I get nervous, and just so you know, I don't know the book by heart. But I will tell you, I've got two parts, and I'll tell you what I put on my brick, because that took a long time for me to decide. And my favorite line in the book is, "Half measures availed us nothing." And that is because I never went halfway to the liquor store. And so I know what that means. I know that I have to give myself 100% to this, because that's what it requires, because I gave more than 100% to drinking. And so 100% to this program is still like a bazillion times easier than drinking. But my favorite chapter in the book, and I think I mentioned this earlier, is more about alcoholism, because there is a level of acceptance that comes with being an alcoholic. You don't just wake up one day and say, I'm an alcoholic and everything, okay, great, let's move on. We're hard-headed. I'm hard-headed. I have a lot of self-will, and I needed that extra chapter. That extra chapter was written, we used to say it was written for me, but now I know it wasn't written for me, because I've been around more women that are like me, who, got back to their cars and said, forget that lady. She doesn't know what she's talking about. I can do this. And so the Jaywalker story is one of my favorites, because I truly, when I sat in Maggie's and someone talked about the Jaywalker, I thought, okay, now we've jumped the shark here. We have jumped the shark. I don't know what these people are talking about. How am I a Jaywalker? But I am, I'm a Jaywalker. Every day I would get up and say, it's going to be different today. I'm not going to fill in the blank, right? I'm not going to drink before 5. I'm not going to blow off cooking dinner for my kids. I'm not going to miss a recital. I'm not going to all those things, right? And I did. And people just look at you like, why? What are you doing? Get it together. This is not normal. Do you not see it? And so I think that's definitely my favorite part of the book, because I think we need that extra clarification and identification, so that we see that as crazy as our behavior is, it's so normal, because we get here with so much shame and so much confusion, thinking I thought I was a normal person, but I'm doing all these crazy things. But that's just a result of my mind and my body, right? Because the once I put booze in my body, this allergy takes me to places I've never been before, and I don't care where it's going to take me because it's controlling me. Like I could cut my head off, put it over here because now I'm a jaywalker, jumping in front of that bus every day. And so that if when I chair meetings, and I get the opportunity, I talk about the chapter more about alcoholism.
Thank you. Okay, so we're getting to the top of the hour, but I do want to ask you one more question before the wrap-up question, because as you were talking, I just started thinking about all of the promises that, the book gives, and that they are promises. And I just would love for you to, I don't know if you want to mention the promises that are like your favorite promises in the book, or the promises that are like, I know different parts of my sobriety, like different promises are like I can feel them, you know what I mean? And so I just wanted to know if you could just talk about like one or two promises, or whatever promises you want that are manifesting in your life today that you know to be true.
Absolutely. I can honestly say that I am living a life with all of the promises. But the one that really resonates with me and was the first thing that came to mind is this fourth dimension, right? I don't get me wrong, it's not every day. There are days when I spend a lot of time in prayer. But I don't think about alcohol. I don't not think about alcohol. I buy booze for Lori. I am able to go to dinner with friends and actually participate in conversations because it doesn't. I'm not worried about where the waiter is and where my next drink is coming from, and I'm not worried about how much is in the car. I'm not worried about do I have any at home? I'm not worried about how much money is in the bank because I'm going to buy the next one, or if I don't have it, who's going to buy it, or none of that, right? It's the wildest thing that I'm in this place of neutrality, but it's also that I have no shame around my story. I'm as transparent as I possibly can be, especially living out here in Frisco, because when we first moved back out here to be near the kids, I was really concerned and scared. And I thought, man, I'm so far away from Maggie's and away from the places I carry the message, and it's going to be so much harder to do the things I need to do. And one day I was walking up to the Kroger and I saw this woman in front of me, and she ducked behind the Christmas tree, and I saw her pull out a little mini bottle of wine, and she started to chug the wine behind the Christmas tree. She was hiding it. And I knew right then that was God's sign to me that it doesn't matter where you are always going to be able to help women. And so, yeah, I definitely encourage women to stick with the program and work the steps, because the miracles come true, and they not always right away. That wasn't my experience, but yeah, the promises definitely come true.
Thank you. All right, and so my wrap-up question, which thank you so much, Tina, for being here with us today. I really appreciate your time and your honesty, and I think you're a gift to so many women. Oh my God, I'm crying, sorry. My wrap-up question is, if you could leave us with one takeaway, if you don't hear anything I say, like, hear this, what would that takeaway be?
Well, I'm trying not to cry. No one ever cries alone. I would say that there is hope. No matter how many times it takes And there's no shame in getting to the place where you are done. And there is a solution. Will shout it from the rooftops as long as I live, that there is a solution, and this really works. But it's only going to work if you've had the gift of desperation. And the gift of desperation comes from a big bottle of vodka. And there's no shame in that. And I tell you, the women that I work with and the women that are in our recovery community, they have mad respect for them, because it is so brave to reach for help. Because when you're in that dark day and you don't think that there's hope, and it happens, but you do, and you are willing to work the steps because because you see somebody it has worked for you, that's worked for them, and you want it to work for you. I mean, there's hope. There's always hope. And if you're not done, it's okay. And when you are, just work this program like your hair is on fire. That's what my sponsor told me, and that language stuck with me, because I drank like my hair was on fire. Because half measures availed me nothing.
Awesome. Thank you so much. All right, y'all. Have a wonderful rest of your day. I will see the Thursday group at 4 o'clock. Thank you, Tina.
Thank you, Tina. Love you.
Thank you, Tina.
Aww.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me, you guys. I love y'all so much.
We hope you've enjoyed this From the Vault re-release of the Magdalen House podcast. Tune in every first and third Wednesday for a release from one of our 3 podcast series. To learn more about the Magdalen House and the services we offer, visit magdalenhouse.org or follow us on your favorite social media channels by searching for the Magdalen House.